Hello everyone and welcome to this new video of Deep in Politics. So today we will be studying together the 2020 presidential election result of the state of Georgia. So as you will see as our study goes on, we will be focusing more on this state than we did in the previous ones because this is a very important state. This is a state that has been shifting lately from Republican to Democrat, and finally the Democrats were able to flip this state in this last election, even though it was by a very small margin, around 0.3%. So, as I said, Georgia has been lately a strong Republican state. As you see here, most of the elections since the beginning of the 90s went toward the Republican. The Republicans were able to win the state of Georgia in most of this election in the past decades. They were even able to win it by big margins in the 2000 and 2004. As you see here, they were able to win the 2000 election by more than 11 points, and the 2004 election by around 17 points. But since then, the gap between them and the Democrat has been going smaller and smaller. As you see, in 2008, they were able to win the election by a little bit more than 5%. While in 2012 they were able to win it by 7%. 7%, it's a good margin, but it's not a big margin, especially if you can compare it to the result in 2000 and 2004. In 2016, President Trump was able to win it also by 5 points. However, the Democrats were able to flip the state in the 2020 election and to win it by 0.2%. As you see here, they won it 49.5% to 49.3%. So, the main reason that made Georgia become a battleground state again, a state where the Democrat and the Republican are very close to each other, is immigration. Indeed, the state of Georgia has been subject to a very powerful wave of immigration since the beginning of the 2000s. There are a lot of people that are coming from outside the state, whether it's from other states or even from different countries, to the state of Georgia, and this is favoring the Democrat. Indeed, most of the people who are coming to the state of Georgia, who are coming from abroad, from another state to the state of Georgia, tend to vote Democrat, and this is what helped the Democrat to close the gap between them and the Republican, and to finally turn the state blue in this 2020 election. So we will be mainly focusing in this study to the effect of immigration on the state of Georgia, as we will see that immigration was the main reason that enabled the Democrat to win the state of Georgia. So most of the counties that I chose to study with you are counties that have been hit by a big wave of immigration. These are counties that has accepted a big number of immigrants, and as we will see, these immigrants were the main reason that led to a change in the voting of these counties. Now, before going into details in the result of some counties, let's just give a general overview of the state of Georgia. So the state of Georgia is a state that has a population of around 10.6 million citizens. It's a diversified state. You have around 32% of black population and black voters, 10% of Hispanic, and 52% of white population. So it's a very diversified county. The minorities in this county forms around half of the population of the state. Sorry, not the county, the state. And other information about this state can be found in the bachelor degree, in the percentage of bachelor degree among the adult population of the state. So as you see here, it has a good percentage of bachelor degree. It's a high bachelor degree. It's around the same as the US, and it's higher than some other states that you already studied together, like the state of Florida and Ohio. So this also should favor the Democrat. Both of the criteria that we just saw should favor the Democrat. Indeed, as we said, minorities tend to vote for the Democrat more than the Republican, and people with a bachelor degree also tend to have more liberal idea and so to vote for the Republican. But most importantly, for the state of Georgia, like you will see here, a very important part of its population is immigrating population. It's population that came to the state recently from abroad, from other states, or even from other countries. So as you see here, around 8% of the population of Georgia in the last few years is made from people who immigrated to this state, is made from people that came from different countries or even from different states. And this, as I said, has had a big impact on the result of the 2020 election, and it has favored the Democrat. Now, before talking about immigration, let's just say that what happened in Georgia, some of what happened in Georgia also happened everywhere else in the US, in the state that we already studied together, and even in the other state, meaning that the white educated voters voted in big number for the Democrat and were one of the reasons that made them do better in the state, whereas the Republican, and unlike what was expected, did good among minorities, whether it's black voters or Hispanic voters. So this is something that we saw countrywide, not only in the state of Georgia. Indeed, we already saw that Democrats surged among white educated voters, whereas Republican did a lot better and improved among minority voters, especially among Hispanic voters, but also among black voters, especially black voter without a bachelor degree, and this is also what we will see here. So before studying the result of some counties, let's see the general result of the state of Georgia in both the 2016 and the 2020 election. So as you see, in 2016, President Trump was able to win the state of Georgia 50.4% to 45.3%. So he won the state by a margin of 5.1%. This is a little bit, it's a lot less than the result of the Republican in the 2000 and 2004. As we said previously, they were able to win the state by more than a double-digit number, whereas in 2016, President Trump was only able to win it by 5%. And he lost it in 2020 to President Biden, who was able to win the state by 2.3%. So you see that there is a big shift in favor of the Democrat that enabled them to flip the state. Most importantly, what I want you also to see is that the result in the state of Georgia saw a big voter turnout. As you see here, it's not the Republican that did bad in the state. Indeed, they improved by around 400,000 votes. They went up from 2 million votes to 2.4 million votes, whereas the Democrat went up from 1.9 million approximately to 2.4 million also. So it's not that the Republican lost some of their vote to the Democrat. No, it's the Democrat that were able to gain a big number of voters in comparison to 2016, and most of this gain was due to immigration, as we will see. Now we will go to our tables to see in depth the result of the general result of the state of Georgia. So as you see here, compared to 2016, the Republican lost 1.1% in the general election result, as their score went down from 50.4% to 49.3%, whereas the Democrats were able to win 4.2% in the general electoral college, as their result went up from 45.3% to 49.5%. This enabled them to close the gap that separated them from the Republican by 5.3%, and so to flip the state of Georgia. Most importantly, what you see here is that the Republicans were able to gain 17.8% more vote compared to 2016, as their general result went up from 2 million to 2.4 million. But the Democrat did even better, and a lot better, as they were able to get 32% more vote than 2016, which is huge. When you talk here, you're talking about 1/3 additional votes. They were able to get 1/3 of additional vote in comparison to 2016. It's around 600,000 to 700,000 votes, which is huge, especially that there is only one election that separates both results, and this was the main reason, and maybe the only reason, that made them flip this state. And as I said, you will see that this is mainly due to the effect of immigration. Now let's move to more details, and let's study some of the counties in more detail. So as we proceeded in previous video, I've divided our study in two branches. First, we will study the result in the small counties of Georgia, and after this we will study the result in the big counties of Georgia. So like everywhere else, generally Republicans do better in small counties, as these counties have more rural voters that are more conservative and tend so to vote more for Republican, whereas the big counties tend to be, whereas in the big counties Democrats tend to do better, as these counties contain more ethnic diversity and more college and so more liberal idea which favor the Democrat. So let's begin by studying the small counties. So like everywhere else, the Republicans were able to improve in most of these counties compared to the 2016 election, as they were able to improve in 77 out of 139 small counties. But still, this is not a big majority, especially if we compare the result of small counties in Georgia to small counties in other states. Indeed, in other states, the Republicans were able to improve in approximately 70 to 75% of small counties, whereas here in Georgia, they were barely able to pass the 50% mark. And also, this was due to immigration. Even small counties in Georgia were hit by immigration, and so there was a lot of persons and of U.S. citizens coming from abroad to these small counties, and most of these immigrants tends to vote Democrat, and so also this enabled the Democrat to improve in many small counties in Georgia. So as you will see now, in most of the counties where the Republicans were able to improve, these were counties that weren't hit by immigration, and so there wasn't a big change in the demography of these counties, and so this also favored the Republican, of course. And most importantly, we will see here that the Republicans were able also to improve among the rural minority voters, meaning the rural black voters and Hispanic voters, which also was one of the main reasons that enabled them to improve in many of these small counties. So I've chosen many small counties that will show us how good Republican did among white rural voters, and this was expected, but also how good they did among minority rural voters. However, we will also see that in most of these counties where Republican improved, there wasn't a big immigration. So these were counties that weren't hit by immigration. So the first county that I've chose is the Baker County. Okay, so Baker County is a small county in Georgia. It has a very small population of around 3,000 U.S. citizens. And so you would expect this to be a rural county, a very rural county where you have a small percentage of bachelor degree, and so you would expect the Republican to improve, and this is what happened. So before going to see the result, you see here, this is very important that you have a big percentage of black voters in this county. So black voters they represent a big part of the voters and of the population. They represent around 40%, and you would expect that the Democrats should do better in this county than the 2016 election, because black voters should turn in their favor in bigger number than they did previously, but this didn't happen, and President Trump was able to improve among black voters. Second thing that I want you to see in this county is the percentage of bachelor degree. It's a very low percentage. It's less than 13%. So this is a very rural county. This is a country where you don't have a lot of educated people, and so this should give advantage to the Republican. And most importantly, you see here that this is a county that wasn't hit by immigration, as only 4% of its population is from people who immigrated to this county recently, and 0% of its population is from people who came from abroad, from another state. So these 4% are people who came from Georgia but from another county, and so most of these people don't have a big impact, or at least they don't have as much impact as people coming from other states. So let's see the result of this county. I've drew a table here to make it easy for you to see the comparison instead of comparing them here by going from a page to another. So as you see here in Baker County, the Republicans were able to gain 3.9% in comparison to 2016. The result went up from 53.8% to 57.7%, whereas the Democrat lost 3.2% as the result went down from 45.1% to 49.9%. So countywide, the Republicans were able to increase their lead over the Democrat by 7.1%. It's quite a big margin. Yeah, it's true that it's a very small county where you only have less than 2,000 votes. But remember that this happened in many of the small counties of Georgia. So what we can deduce from this analysis and from this comparison is that the Republicans were able to improve among black voters, among rural black voters, because you would expect them to do good among white rural voters. We already knew that, but for this important surge to happen, for them winning 7% over the Democrat in comparison to last election, they should have done good among black rural voters, and only their surge among this category of voter could explain their big increase and their big progress in this county. So another county that I will study with you where Republicans were able to improve compared to 2016 is the county of Hancock. So the county of Hancock is a bigger county than Baker County. It has a population of around 8.5 thousand. It's a county where you have a big majority of black population and black voters. They represent around 75% of the general population in the county of Hancock. And so you would expect the Democrat to do better than 2016 in this county, because you would expect them to surge among black voters. However, this is not what happened. As you see here, when we compare the 2016 to the 2020 result, you see that the Republicans were able to gain 4.3% in the general result of the counties, as the result went up from 23.5% to 27.8%, whereas the Democrat lost 3.7%, as the result went down from 75.4% to 71.7%, which represent a shift of 8% in favor of Republicans. And so once again, we see that shift cannot be explained unless we accept that the Republicans were able to surge among black voters, rural black voters. As you see here, they got a huge boost in comparison to 2016, as they were able to get 36.8% more votes than the 2016 election. Whereas the Democrats weren't able to improve big, they only were able to get 10% more vote than 2016. So once again, we see how good Republicans did among black voters in the state of Georgia, and we've also seen this in all the other states that we studied. And this was one of the main reasons that kept this election close between the Republican and the Democrat, because if it wasn't from the minority voters that voted for Republican, whereas it's the Hispanic voters or the black voters, the Democrat would have won this election by a huge margin, even bigger than the margin that they won with. So another county that I want to study with you in order to let you see that the Republican did good in rural area is the county of Jasper County. It's a county of around 3.8 thousand voters, so also it's a small county. Here it's a county that have a big majority of white voters. Most of these voters don't have a bachelor degree, so they are rural white voters. As you see here, they have only less than 20% of the adult population of Jasper County has a bachelor degree. And so when you see white rural voters and a small percentage of bachelor degree, you would expect the Republican to do very good in this county, and this is indeed what happened, as they were able to gain 4.2% in comparison to 2016. We see here that they got 76.2% in the 2020 election, whereas they only got 72.1% in the 2016 election. The Democrat, unlike the Republican, lost in the general result of the counties. They only got 23% in comparison to 25.5% in 2016. And so this is expected. You would expect the Republican to do better in a county where you have a big majority of white voters, these white voters being, for the majority of them, rural voters and voters without a bachelor degree. But here you see that this county was hit by a huge amount of immigration. You have around 15% of its population coming from outside the county. You have 9% coming from different states and 6% coming from different county. And so you see that immigration could favor the Republicans sometimes, especially when it's an immigration hitting a rural county, because generally educated people with a bachelor degree don't come to a rural country because they don't have work here. So people with a bachelor degree don't work in agriculture, they don't work in the land, so they mainly go to somewhere where there is business, where there is companies, and so they don't usually immigrate to rural area. And so this immigration here, this immigration to Jasper County, which is a rural county, favored the Republican as we saw. So now moving to the Democrat to see how good they did in small counties, I've also chosen a bunch of small counties where you will see that the Democrats were able to improve. And here we see that unlike other states, the Democrats were able to improve in an important part of small counties. They were able to surge in many small counties. They were able to improve in around 40% of small counties compared to 2016. And this is a result that we didn't see in other states. Indeed, generally, it's the Republican who improved in a big majority in most of the small counties. However, here the immigration played an important role in order to let the Democrat improve even in small counties. So the first somehow small county where Republican improved and that I decided to study with you is the county of Bryan County. So here it's not a really small county, it's a county with a 37,000 population, but still compared to the big county of Georgia, we can easily consider it a small county. So as you see here, it's a county that has a big percentage of white voters, so the majority of voters are white voters, and you also have around 20% of black and Hispanic voters. As for the percentage of bachelor degree, it has a big percentage of bachelor degree, especially when you consider that it's a small county. It has a percentage of 33.1% of adult people having a bachelor degree. And so here you would expect, if it wasn't from immigration, the Republican to do a little bit better, because there is a big majority of white voters, and whereas you have, and even though you have a big percentage of bachelor degree, still you would expect the Republican to improve, even if by a little bit. But this isn't what happened. As you see here in the county of Bryan, the Republican lost in the general election result around 2.7% compared to 2016. You see that they went down from 69.4% to 66.7%, whereas the Democrats were able to gain a lot of ground. The result went up from 26.5% to 31.6%. This is an improvement of 5.1%. As so, in the general result, we see that the Democrats were able to gain ground over the Republican by 7.8%. They were able to lower the gap that separated them from the Republican by 7.8%. And what you see, what is the most important here, what attracts you, is the huge gain of Democrat in the general results. They were able to gain around 68% more votes than 2016. This is an increase of around 70%. It's a huge. Imagine that the Democrats were able to get 70% more vote than 2016. So a gain of around 70% in an interval of only four years is huge, and this can only be explained by immigration, because look here, even the Republicans were able to gain an important share of votes compared to 2016. They got around 35.2% of additional votes than 2016, and so if you don't look to the result of the Democrat, you will easily consider or predict that the Republican improved in the state by a big margin. But because 35.2% is a big improvement, it's a big gain of voters in only 4 years. But you see here that the Democrat were able to do around twice as good as the Republican, and this is only due and can only be explained by the huge immigration that hit this county. As you see here, more than 12% of the population of this county is made from of people who came from other counties to this county, or also from people that came from other state to this county. And so this, as we said, favored the Democrat in Georgia, and this is an example of how good it favored them. And we will see that this also happened in many other small counties. Here we have the county of White, so this is a smaller county than the previous one. It's also a county where there is a big majority of white population. The white population almost make all the population of this county. And like the previous county, you see that, no, here, look here, there is a small percentage of bachelor degree among the population of this county. So when you are in a rural county, where there is a big percentage, or where almost all the population are white population, with a small percentage of bachelor degree among the adult population, you would easily expect that the Republican will improve, and will improve big in this county, like what happened in similar counties in other states. But what we get here, we see that in this county, in White County, it's the Democrat that improves, even if it's only slightly, but still they were able to gain 1.6% over the Republican in comparison to 2016. And I've chose this county, even though the improvement is very small, to show you that the Democrats were able to improve even in county where we would expect the Republican to improve by a very big margin compared to 2016. So by comparing the result of these county in the 2016 and the 2020 election, and although you would expect the Republican to improve very big in this county due to the conditions and to the criteria that we just saw, it's the Democrat that were able to gain ground over the Republican, even though it's a small gain of 1.6% in the general result. But still, I've chosen this county because, as I said, it's a county where you would expect the Republican to improve by a big margin, but it's the Democrat that were able to improve. And the main reason for them improving is their big gain of voters, the big number of voters that they gained in comparison to 2016. You see here that they gained around 41% more votes than the Democrat, whereas the Republican didn't lose any votes. Indeed, in contrary, they were able to win around 3,000 votes, but it's the big amount of gain for the Republican that enabled them to improve in this county. You see here that they gain around 41% more voters in comparison to their result in 2016. And of course, this can only be explained by immigration. Look here, you have around 8% of the population of this county that moved in a year or less ago to this county. And so, of course, if you take the result of immigration in the past 4 years, the share of immigrant will even go higher. And so this is what explained the surge of Democrat in this county, even though you would expect the Republican to surge. So one last somehow small county that will show you how good how influent was the immigration and how good it was for Democrat is the county of Walton County. So Walton County is not a really small county, it's a medium-sized county. It's a county where you have around 100,000 people living in it, so it's not a small county anymore. It's a county that have an important majority of white voters. Around 3/4 of the population of this county are white voters. So you also here have a low percentage of bachelor degree among the population and the adult population of this county. So once again, you see that there is a big share of white population and a low percentage of bachelor degree. You would also expect the Republican to do better, like they did in counties other than the state of Georgia. But once again, we see that it's the Democrat who were able to improve big in this county. You see that they were able to gain 4.4% in comparison to 2016. Their result went up from 20.4% to 24.8%, whereas the Republican lost 2.4%, as they only got 74.1% in comparison to 76.5% in the 2016 result. And so this contributed to a shift of 6.8% in the general result in favor of the Democrat. And as you see, once again, the main reason for this shift is the big amount of new voters that the Democrats were able to get. They were able to get 53% more voters than what they did in 2016. And once again, these are not voters that used to vote Republican and that voted for Democrat this time, as the Republican were also able to improve the number of voters that they got by 21.6%. They got 21.6% more votes in comparison to 2016. And so we can say that the reason of this shift, this big shift and this big gain of voters for the Democrat is that the Republican lost voters in this county. No, it's not the case. This big shift can only be explained by immigration, and here we see the numbers. You have around 12% of the population of this county coming from other county or even from other state, and this immigration, once again, we see that it's favoring the Democrat, and this is what happened statewide. Immigration was and is the main reason that led the Democrat to flip the state. And this immigration has been helping the Democrat since a long time now. We see that since the year 2004, the gap that separated the Republican from the Democrat was beginning to go and grow smaller and smaller, and they were finally able to flip the state. And the immigration is the main reason and maybe the only reason that can explain this shift over the past years. So before moving to the big counties, just let me explain to you why immigration generally favor the Democrat and not the Republican. The reason is that, as we saw, most of the people who vote Republican are rural voters, are voters who work in agriculture, who have small business, and so this type of voters tend to be more attached to their land because of their work mainly, and so they don't usually leave their counties. And these voters, because they are rural voters, because they are attached to their land, are generally conservative voters. And so conservative voters, Republican voters, generally don't go in big numbers from a county to another or even to a state from another. Whereas people who have a bachelor degree, people who go to college, generally they tend to immigrate more than other people because they have a bachelor degree, and so they might find a better job opportunity in another state or even in another county. And most of the people who went to college and who have a bachelor degree generally have more liberal idea, and so they tend to vote for Democrat more. And it's for this reason that immigration generally favor the Democrat. However, immigration favor the Democrat in the state that is a destination for immigration, like the state of Georgia. However, in the state where people are going from the state to another state, of course, these are states where the Republican are favored, because most of the people who are going out from the state are Democrat and liberal voters, and the ones who are staying are Republican and conservative voters. And in this state, we see that it's the Republican that will be favored and that will gain ground. And this is, for example, what's happening in the Blue Wall in the state of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Now, we'll talk about this when we get to this state. But I wanted to explain you why immigration generally, or what impact immigration has on both parties. Now we will move to big state. Okay, so big state, like everywhere else, are more subject to immigration. Immigration happened in them in bigger way than in small counties, and so here the Democrat did very, very good, and they were able to crush and to destroy the Republican in these states, as they were able to improve in all the big counties of Georgia. They literally improved in all big counties of Georgia. There is 20 big counties in Georgia. There is 20 counties with more than 100,000 population, and in all these counties, it's the Democrats that were able to improve. And in 8 of these 20 counties, the Democrats were able to improve by more than 10 points, which is huge. And when you improve in big counties by more than 10 points, this means that you will improve a lot in the general result of the state. Because, as I said previously, an improvement of 10% in a big state is a lot more influential than an improvement by 10 or even 20% in a small counties. So the first county that I chose, the first big county that I chose that I will study with you is the county of Gwinnett. So Gwinnett is one of the biggest county of Georgia. It has a population of around 1 million citizens. Once again, we see that like many big counties, it's a very diversified counties. Only 35% of the population are white population, while the other 65% are black voters, Hispanic voters, and we also have an important share of Asian voters. This county has a big percentage of bachelor degree. You see here that it has a population, a percentage of bachelor degree among its adult population of 30%. This is a very high percentage. It's 20% higher than the average rate in the United States, which is 33.1%. And so you would expect the Democrat to do better in this county because all the criteria play in their favor, whether it's the ethnic diversity or even the percentage of bachelor degree among the adult population. So by comparing the result of the 2016 and the 2020 election in the county of Gwinnett, we see that the Democrats were able to improve big. First, they were able to gain 8.2% in the general result of the counties, as their result went up from 50.2% to 58.4%, whereas the Republican lost big in the county. They only got 40.2%, whereas they got 44.4% in the previous election. And the main reason for the Democrat improving is not that the Republican lost vote or that a big number of persons that used to vote for Republican shifted for Democrat. No, we see clearly that the Republicans were able to gain 13.6% more vote than 2016. They got around 20,000 more votes, but it's the Democrat that did very, very well in this county, as they were able to get around 50% more vote than the last election. And this can only be explained by immigration, because you cannot explain this big surge of Democrat in this county, especially when you know that even the Republicans were able to improve in the general result. So here, like many other big counties in Georgia, immigration played a big role in favor of the Democrat, and it made them extend their lead over Republican in the general result by 12.4%, and 12.4% in a county that is as big as Gwinnett County is a big improvement, and it had a big impact on the general result of the state of Georgia. It was one of the main reasons for Democrats being able to flip the state. So another big county that I want to study with you in order to show you how good the Democrat did and how important the effect of immigration was in their favor is the county of Forsyth. Forsyth County is a big county of Georgia. It has a population of around 250,000. As you see here, you have an important majority of white population, around 70%. You also have 15% of Asian, 10% of Hispanic, and 4% of black voters. However, as we said, the biggest share of voters and population are white voters. You have a huge percentage of bachelor degree. More than 56% of the adult population of the counties have a bachelor degree, and so this should favor the Democrat, of course, as educated people tend to be more liberal, and so tend to vote more for the Democrat than they do for Republican. So as you see here, by comparing both results, you see how good Republicans were able to improve in this county, and look by how much they were able to increase their voter base. They almost doubled the number of votes that they got in comparison to 2016. They were able to increase their voter base by 80%, which is a huge increase, especially in only 4 years. And once again, we see that this increase is not due for Republicans not doing well in the state. Even the Republicans were able to increase the number of votes that they got by 22%. But look at this huge increase of around 80%. And of course, only immigration could explain this. And once again, we see that immigration played a big role in improving the score of Democrat in Georgia. So we see here that the Democrats were able to gain in the general result 8.9% more than 2016, whereas the Republican lost 4.8%. Their score went from 70.6% to only 65.8%, whereas the Democrats were able to surge and to score a score of 32.6% instead of the 23.7% that they got in 2016. And this represents a shift, a big shift of 13.7% in favor of the Democrat in comparison to the 2016 result, and a shift of 13.7% in a state or in a county where you have around 1.2, or where you have around 120,000 votes. It's a big shift. It will have a big influence in the general result of the state, and this is indeed what happened. Once again, you see how important was the effect of immigration here. You have around 7% of the general population of this county coming from abroad, from outside the county, and 7% in a big county is a big percentage. And this is only in the last 1 or 2 years. So in the previous 4 years, of course, the percentage will even go higher. So as we see, once again, immigration favored the Democrat in a huge manner. The last big county that shows how good the Democrat did in big counties and how important was the effect of immigration in their favor is Henry County. Once again, Henry County is a big county. It's a county that have around 250,000 of population. It's a very diversified county. 43% of population are white, and the other 43% are black. We also have Hispanic and Asian. So most of the voters of this county are minority voters. It's also a county where you have an average percentage of bachelor degree. It's not very high. It's 26.2%. So it's not one of the highest of the state or even of the country. And so you would expect the result to be very similar to what happened in 2016, but as we will see, it's the Democrat that did a lot better in this county of Henry. As you see here, look by how much. It's a huge shift. It's a huge shift in favor of the Democrat. The Republican lost big in this county in the general result. They lost around 6.8%. They only got 39.2% of the votes, whereas in 2016 they got around 46%. However, it's not that they lost vote. If you want to count the number of votes, also they improved by around 6%. Yes, it's not a big improvement, but it's not also a loss. And so you would maybe expect the Democrat to do better than 2016, but not by 16.1%. Look, the Republicans were able to gain 9.3% more vote than 2016. They were able to improve from 50.4% in the general result to 59.7%, and this was mainly due to the huge new number of votes that they got. They got around 23,000 more votes, which is a huge. If you compare the 23,000 vote to the number of votes that they got in 2016, it's almost an addition of half of the vote that they got in 2016. You see here that they were able to get 46.7% more vote than 2016, which is a huge. And of course, this big boost, this big number of voter increase can also be explained only by immigration. So we saw in all the state, in all the counties that we studied where the Democrats were able to surge, that these were counties that were hit by a huge wave of immigration. Immigration played in favor of Democrat. And why did it favor Democrat? Because, as I told you, it's generally the people that have a bachelor degree, the liberal voters that tend to immigrate a lot more than rural voters. And so this was the main reason that enabled the Democrat to flip this county and to turn it blue after many decades of Republican dominance over this state. So the state of Georgia, that was once a safe Republican state, is not this anymore, and this is mainly due to immigration. And the problem is that it doesn't seem that immigration will stop in the following year. It seems that the state of Georgia will also continue to welcome new comers to the state. They will welcome more immigrants, and once again this immigration will play, it seems, in favor of the Democrat, that might be able not only to flip the state or to keep it blue in the next election, but also to win it by a bigger margin. However, as I said in previous lecture, I do expect the Republican to gain back some of the white educated voters, especially if their next candidate is not to the right as much as President Trump. Some of the anti-voters Trump might go back and vote for the Republican, or maybe they will not vote, not for the Republican, but also not for the Democrat, and this will help the Republican improve the result in all the states of the United States. However, I don't think that this improvement will be enough to counterbalance the effect of immigration. So from now on, I do think that the state of Georgia will remain a battleground state, of course, but that the Democrat will have an advantage of winning it over the Republican. So that being said, this was the analysis of the state of Georgia. It's a state that we should keep an eye on in the next election to see where it's going on. But as I tell you, it seems that the Democrat will get the advantage. Thank you for listening to this video, and I will see you soon in another video of Deep in Politics.